It's clear from previous vision space presentations that vision is closer to a controlled hallucination than it is the projection of optics. In those presentations, we looked at the structure of phenomenal field as it occurs in typical situations. From them, we have also established that the fundamentals of perceptual structure can be linked to computational vision science. A full list could be found at the end of this presentation. In typical circumstances, the phenomenon is manifesting within its comfort zone. I've long been aware that we are likely to learn a good deal about the factors involved if we examine what occurs when the system is put under stress. It's difficult enough to intuitively examine the structure of the phenomenon under standard situations, and without a good understanding of this already in place, it would be impossible to track and substantiate what's occurring in a stress situation. There would be nothing to set the observations obtained under stress against. As part of this triptych, I deliberately set up a scenario where a start can be made. If you're interested in the subject matter of this painting, I can direct you to an article on PAC's website or ResearchGate. I will just point out that in these paintings, what's going on in the peripheral areas of the paintings is as important, if not more important, than what's going on in the centre. The context has it. In the first, we have broadly a picture space scenario with just the inclusion of some right and left eye considerations. In the third, we have just digital pixels in play conforming to purely optical projection. Here, however, we need to consider in detail what's going on in the central panel. My hands are superimposed over an image of the execution of James Foley. The structure of the entire image conforms to vision space rendering. The hands are positioned over my face to shield us from this horror born of human ignorance, which puts them in the visual stress zone, namely extreme foreground. How does the visual system deal with this situation? Well, it's complex and atypical, and I think it reinforces what has been learned about our highly managed presentations of vision. The phenomenon of vision really has next to nothing to do with the projection of optics. We'll be concentrating on the compositions of phenomenal field made by mind as it struggles to make sense of the situation. It may well be that the specifics of these observations are personal, i.e. relevant to the way that my mind performs the task. In this image I'm wearing a peaked cap, and the tip of this can be seen at the top. My thumbs are positioned close to the ends of my eyebrows, with their tips just touching the peak of the hat. I'm actually fixating on a point just a metre or so in front of me, so not as far away as the painting suggests. This is, after all, a montage. The principal realisation emerging with greater force than I was expecting is the developing plasticity of phenomenal field. The degree of pure fabrication involved that has to go on prior to conscious awareness of what there is to see. Heavy compositional tasks are performed up front with live modulations. This identifies that our comprehension of the environment is guided by cues existing prior to our more conceptual thought processes associated with occlusion cues and size constancy. These picture space cues involve us resolving issues relating to geometrical considerations, bound up with central perspective and optical projection. The question is then, is it right to think about early stage visual salience as deriving from cues that must involve representation? Fundamental visual salience appears to be occurring prior to conscious awareness. We are aware of a presentation, but not how the presentation was formed or realized. Beyond this initial state, the hallucination has significant potential to reorganize in response to circumstance and our explicit intent in the world, while continuing to provision a general implicit spatial awareness. The situation becomes highly fluid and fragmentary. The apparent paradox as to how these composite presentations emerge as a homogeneous field of view is likely to be bound up in our memory of the initial underlying precognitive state of implicit spatial awareness. Stress situations reveal the strategies mind adopts in the formation of these intricate interrelations. How explicit data from the scene is presented within implicit spatial awareness. Either the mind has to work hard to assemble and support the impression of a homogeneous field of view from all the fragments, or we are aware of an underlying homogeneous precognitive state, and so don't attend to the transitory compositional artifacts occurring no matter how extreme. We appear to be willing partners in the grand illusion. Undertaking to record these processes with hands in front of my face obviously entails remembering what has been seen and then recording it. Every mark made requires multiple views to establish. These marks and realizations are then revisited as other adjacent realizations are made to ensure that they're stable. So what I try to establish as the depiction is the preferred or stable arrangement given the specific intent involved in forming fixation. I'm aware that I have to look at the scene in the same way each time, and if not, to be aware of this and why it's different. Only then can the differences, realized, be attributed, i.e. be structured to hold a meaning or verifiable impact. The degree of success is ultimately manifested in the degree to which the paintings work and hold meaning for others. This is the original drawing of the hands, allowing me to transcribe them into the painting. The field of marks can then be applied to the rest of the scene prior to rendering the hands themselves. It was quickly apparent that what was presenting in vision was not structured in the same way as a typically perceptually structured view of the environment. In these circumstances, order is asserted according to some relatively simple operations. I certainly haven't nailed these yet, but I'm confident of some of the basics, confident enough to translate these into a software program. This typical formation of perceptual structure actually breaks down under the stress situation, where the compromises required are greater due to the extreme disparity, i.e. the distance between the eyes, and hence the artifacts are more extreme and obvious. This reveals that while the basics may be stable, they're not hardwired. They are themselves just a preference. To me, this indicates the self-organizing nature of mind and its potentials. It also once again indicates that conventional 3D has nothing much to do with vision. As I look out through my hands at the fixation point, I think I get a good impression of the scene. And of course I do, given the circumstances. But this is never going to occur to our current imaging technologies. In forming a still depiction, it's possible to reveal something about the mechanisms involved, the mechanisms that drive perceptual structure. Far from simply setting out the right-hand eye view on the right and the left on the left, as per the typical scenario, I was immediately aware of a contravention in this preferred perceptual arrangement. In a typical scenario, composition is handled through structuring visual field, breaking this into areas and then alternating and modulating eye views within those areas. In the stress situation, the hands appear to be divided as objects and then parts of objects, not regions or areas of phenomenal field. I can determine and record that to the left we have the right-hand view of the fingers, but the entire thumb is from the left-hand view. Also that while the fingers and hand are cross-wired with respect to a typical formation, they are also repositioned. If I mark the position between the fingers where they meet the main area of the hand in both the left and the right eye views independently, by closing one eye or the other, its position varies accordingly. When both eyes are open and phenomenal field is forming, mind positions this junction midway between the extreme positions. It fabricates. The thumb positions are retained and specific to right and left eye views. There are going to be some significant aberrations occurring elsewhere as a result of this. Whole areas of the hands actually simply disappear or are suppressed, and whole object segments are butted that don't touch one another in physical space. This is clearly articulated as you look at the top and try to discover where the index finger is. It's not there, or it's just ghosted in at the very top. Each hand has just 3 fingers. Did you notice this? Change blindness occurs because we compose vision, not project pictures. We now need to look at the fingers in more detail. Disparity is causing havoc here. What can the mind do about this situation? First, consider the fixation point. See how our need for explicit awareness in this region of vision is driving suppression. Information about the fingers that would occlude what is being fixated is suppressed. As we move up to the next tier of fingers, we can see that the requirement to suppress in central vision has been removed. Here we can clearly see the zigzag configuration mind settles on, using the possible views to assemble, as best it can, a line to indicate the obstruction that the fingers present to the line of sight with respect to the broader environment. This is once again in part a creative positioning act on behalf of mind. The positions are not simply cut and paste selection from some kind of topographical map projected from the retina to be assembled by mind. We have isolated the forms and repositioned them to create a more meaningful impression of the scene. The presentation lies beyond mere projection. The world is not being represented under translation. It's being creatively interpreted. This indicates that vision is driven by factors unrelated to the projection of optics, and it's going to be critical to our understanding of vision to identify what the missing factors are that appear to be driving the engine of perceptual structure. It's through this engine that multi-sense integration is achieved. As other vision space presentations attempt to establish, we have to be generating an implicit form of spatial awareness that allows us to undertake these creative processes. None of our existing communication technologies work in accordance with our perceptual structure. As we spend more and more time immersed in our ICTs, this is bound to be having profound effects on neural pathway formation, especially in critical periods in childhood and old age. Understanding these processes will enhance all ICTs, paving the way for a renaissance involving the creation of a raft of perceptual technologies for entertainment, learning, work, and mental health therapy.